Welcome back, it's me Lou, and today we are here for another action figure unboxing and review. And we are looking at this, the Marvel Legends series, Peter B. Parker from the movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Alright, so this is an older figure. This came out months ago. I've been wanting this figure since day one, but I was just never compelled enough to buy it whenever I saw it in the stores. Partially I think is because I didn't want to get sucked into like wanting to do the Build-A-Figure. As much as I wanted to build up Stiltman, I don't know, I was just kind of withdrawn from the Spider-Man line, and I just wanted to focus on other things. I might have been distracted with maybe G.I. Joe Classified, and maybe some Transformer figures at the time. So it wasn't that I wasn't interested in the figure, it's just that I wasn't interested enough. But I saw this at Walmart the other day. It was the last figure they had. I mean, the Peter Parker figure and the Frogman, they've been kind of like, they've been sitting on the shelves for a while. And I haven't seen Miles, Gwen, Prowler, or the Hand Ninja forever. And we're at the point where I don't think the store is going to get restocks. So I'm like, this is the last figure that's just sitting there on the shelf. I don't know when the next time I'll see it. So I decided to buy it. It was now or never. And lucky me, when I checked this out at the register, it was actually $5 cheaper than what it normally was. So, I fortunately got the figure on sale. So, I felt that I was in a good place. A little bit of figure luck, and here we are. So let's examine the figure. First off, the package. It's what you come to expect from Marvel Legends. It's the black. They have the Spider-Verse logo on top. And this is Peter B. Parker. The package does a nice job of framing the character. And on the left side, we get the different head. We get the Stiltman head. Peter's like soda that he's always drinking. The different hands. On the back, on the spine, we have some character artwork. And we have another portrait of him. Same one, but this more blown up. And Peter Parker mentors Miles Morales, an all-new Spider-Man, to understand the importance of power and responsibility. And as I mentioned earlier, here's the complete wave. We have Miles Morales, Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker, Prowler, the Hand, and Frogman. Now, I didn't pick up Miles or Gwen. I kind of wanted them, but I bought that 2-pack that I'm not sure if it was a Target exclusive that came out around the time of the movie. But one thing I find curious is that, so this, these are Spider-Verse figures, but the Peter Parker looks very cartoony, very stylized as he appears in the film. But the Gwen, it almost looks like a much more realistic approach to the character. And I think the 2-pack was also a realistic approach also. So I find that kind of fascinating. It's been a while since I've seen the movie. I remember liking it a lot. I really enjoyed the Peter character. I love the fact that even he's like down on his luck. He broke up with Mary Jane. He's putting on some weight. He's just not really doing much of anything, and then he meets Miles, and he kind of takes on the... It's almost like he kind of takes on the Obi-Wan role, and it's kind of cool how they kind of have that student-teacher relationship, and while Peter's very broken, kind of takes his relationship with Miles to put him back on track, and I think that's a cool thing. One thing I like about the package, I like the backdrop, the cardboard backdrop that comes with it. It's very reminiscent of that Spider-Verse look where it's like covered with that dotty kind of like moire pattern. Kind of reminds me of, what's the artist? I think Lichtenstein. Yeah, so I really dig this. This is cool. First impressions of the figure while it's still in the plastic tray. I like it a lot. I don't know, there's something about the character that I could overlook any flaws this figure might have just because I love the character so much. Peter Parker's... It depends on who's writing Peter Parker or how he's portrayed. I always like Peter Parker when he's funny and he's more down to earth and grounded. I've never been fond of the Peter Parker where he's tormented and he can't decide if he wants to be Spider-Man because the people around him are always getting hurt or he's messing things up. I like Peter when he's kind of like funny, a little bit stable. You know, this kind of not necessarily the full life of the party, but he's the kind of guy I just want to hang out with. I might not take I might forget to look at the accessories later, so let's just look at them real briefly. So we have the cool head where he's partially masked. You know, he's kind of like has that look on his face like, what's going on here? And his mask's half off. We have Stilt Man, and in all honesty, I might use his head for something else. I don't think I have any desire to complete Stilt Man for as cool as it looks, but I can already kind of foresee myself using this head for another character. I'm not sure what yet, but I like the head a lot. I kind of wish I had more of these. I love this accessory, the cup of soda with a straw, and it's, you know, as usual Spider-Man figures, they give us the multiple hands, the web shooting hands, and he has the fists. Looking at the figure, everything about this character, I don't know, it just cracks me up, and it's awesome all at once. It's a much older looking Peter Parker. He's at this point, you could tell he's past his prime. He's in sweatpants. He looks very disheveled. He's wearing mismatched shoes, and his posture, if you just look at him, he's not standing up straight. He's kind of hunched over a little, and just the way he looks and the look on his face, everything about this character for me is kind of relatable. He reminds me of some people I know. It's just like, it's such a relatable, human-looking version of the character. I mean, even though the face is very cartoon and stylized, it's just the nature of the character and what it represents. I think it's just awesome. And it cracks me up too. Here he is. He's half dressed in uniform, but then he's just wearing this coat, and it looks like he kind of just rolled out of bed. And I don't know. This is not a figure that you buy because you want to like take figure photography and get him in all sorts of cool Spider-Man poses. This is the kind of figure that you just get and he just stands there and he just looks cool. I like the fact that he feels very new to me. It's a very unique sculpt. It's not like other Spider-Man figures where it's the same mold used over and over again. The only thing is maybe it's a repaint or it's a little bit different. But this feels like a completely new experience. Man, these are tight joints. He has double jointed elbows, but there we go. Yeah, look at that. That's so fun. One thing I kind of wish is that, like, back in the day, especially with the Toy Biz figures, they were so heavy on the washes and the dry painting and stuff, and just bringing out the details. But a figure for like this, the webbing on his uniform is just carved and sculpted in. It'd be nice if we got, you know, maybe like a light wash over it just to bring out the details more. But I understand, you know, maybe there's a certain, you know, production cost they have to meet and they can't go over budget, and, you know, they have to keep it affordable. I like his sculpt on his head a lot. Like, especially on his hair, it's nice and crisp, and there's this one dangling piece right there. And he has a kind of like a 5 o'clock shadow. I was kind of hoping they'd make a, you know, this version of Peter Parker, but actually without the coat. But this is what I get, and I can live with it. It's cool. I'm so stoked that this is like it feels like a completely new figure to me, just because the sculpting and the mold's so unique. Like I can't see them using this, you know, these sweatpants on any other character in the future, or I'm not sure. I could be wrong. Maybe this coat has been used on something else. This coat looks really awesome because it kind of reminds me of the coat that Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, I could be wrong, but for some reason it just reminds me of that coat that Arnold Schwarzenegger wore in the first Terminator film. I think he wore that crazy coat when he raided the police department and shot it to hell. So yeah, this is cool. His head has, you can look up, which is awesome because it's on a joint. Spins around. His arm rotates. It's cut at the bicep. As I mentioned before, double jointed elbows. He has wrist articulation. Does he spins at the waist and below the chest. Swivel at the thigh. He has double jointed knees. One leg, it doesn't want to move as easily as the other one. Okay, there you go. His ankles move. It's kind of a hard fit. It's cool. I like this guy. I mean, I think if you're a little kid, I think this is like, if you had your choices of Spider-Man figures, I think this would be at the bottom of your list. He's not very heroic looking. I think this is something, like, if you're over the ages of 30 and up, you could probably appreciate this, not because it's Spider-Man, but it's because it's relatable. I mean, if you're in my age group, you know, I'm not gonna say how old I am, but if you're in my age, let's say if you're anywhere above the age of maybe 35, I think this is a very relatable person and character. You know, I have friends, they just kind of just stand there and they just look like this. Not that life is beating them up, but it's like, you know, this like doing the 9 to 5 and dealing with home life. People just, I think at a certain point in your life, you're just always tired, and he just looks always tired. I think he's just tired of fighting crime. This guy's burned out because his wife left him, and you know, he needs to like straighten his act out. And I think that's one of the cool things about the movie. You know, he meets Miles Morales and Gwen and the other Spider-Men, and he kind of has purpose again, and he kind of has this renewed vigor. And I'm really looking forward to the sequel. The first movie was brilliant. Miles Morales was a character that it took me a long time to warm up to. I've said this in other videos before, like, you know, they'll take characters like Batman and Wolverine and Spider-Man and Superman, and for some reason the comic book industry always feels a need to give you a different version of that character. You know, it's like, hey, if you enjoy Batman, here's a, you know, spin on the character, and they'll give you a more violent Batman. Or if you like Wolverine but you want Wolverine as a girl, here's Wolverine's daughter / clone. For some characters it makes sense, like the Green Lantern, because, you know, it's the Green Lantern Corps. So I could you know, I could appreciate the fact that it's a core of superheroes with the same kind of shared power, and it's more of a title. You know, Green Lantern's more of a title than a specific designation. Although each lantern's designated to a specific sector. But for Spider-Man, it's kind of like, you know, Peter Parker is always going to be my Spider-Man. You know, so for a long time I had a hard time accepting Miles Morales, but, you know, they made him an essential part of the Marvel Universe, and I couldn't look past that anymore. And even the title of Into the Spider-Verse by itself, it acknowledges the fact that, you know, Peter's not alone, that there's different multiverses, different universes, and every universe has its own Spider-Man, and every universe is Spider-Man's unique to that, you know, that era or period. But for me, you know, my Spider-Man is this. I'm not sure if it's this Peter Parker. I'm not sure if he represents, was it Earth 616? But this is a Peter Parker I could get behind. He's awesome. And since we're on the subject of Spider-Man, especially Spider-Man in coats, I have a couple of other Spider-Man figures we could look at. So first off, we have, I believe this is from Spider-Man, was this Homecoming? This is I don't know, I as much as I like this figure, this look, I couldn't get into it. So this is Spider-Man from Homecoming. I think it was the first Marvel Sony Spider-Man movie. And I think this is the one where On the movie posters, you just see him chilling by the bridge, and he'd be wearing like headphones, and he'd be wearing his school coat, and it's all right. I mean, it does what it does. It's still Spider-Man. You know, if he took off the arms and took off the coat, it's essentially the same figure you got, where it's just pure Spider-Man. And I have nothing against it. I'm glad I have this in my collection, and it portrays a much younger version of Peter. He's still in high school. I'm not sure how old Tom Holland is now, but this is a nice Marvel Legends figure. He's short, kind of reflects the size of a kid. Here's another Tom Holland Spider-Man. I don't know which. This could be from. I want to say it might be from Homecoming, or this might even be from Civil War. I think there was a Civil War 3-pack that came with Tony Stark. He was in his armor, Iron Man armor, but it was all beat up and burnt out. And I think there was a beat up Cap figure, and I think there was a Spider-Man. This might have been from that set. I lose track. There's so many. But this is a cool Peter also. His head looks a little big, but, you know, kids have big heads. And he's shorter in stature. And then as the movies progress along, we have his Iron Spider outfit. I like the Iron Spider costume a lot. It's weird. This is the Marvel Legends one. I might go into this into another video, but it's weird that the Marvel Legends Iron Spider, you know, you're paying $20 for a premium figure, and he doesn't have the spider legs on his back, whereas the basic version of this figure, the $9 version of it, actually did. And I'm hopefully going to review that video soon, because I think that's a neat figure for $9. I mean, both those figures are out of print, but I don't know. I like this figure a lot. It has a nice kind of like metallic sheen on his uniform, and the texture on it's just beautifully sculpted. It has a lot of micro texture. This is the Spidey I believe people call Pizza Spidey. This is Marvel Legends. It's based more so off the comic book version. I kind of want to say I think it's based off Ultimate Spider-Man, just because of the eyes. It's very reminiscent, I think, of artist Mark Bagley's interpretation of Spider-Man. This is the one that people love. It's he's smaller in stature, so he's definitely Peter in high school. Very articulated, and this model of figure, this mold, I have such bad luck with it. These butterfly joints always, for some reason on other figures, they always get caught and they get stuck, and then every time I'm moving them, I think they're moving, but it's actually a stuck joint, and what I'm actually doing is tearing the peg. So every time I buy this figure, because they released this mold like so many times over, but every time I buy this figure, I'm like always so nervous to move the butterfly joints, because I've had a history in the past. I've like bought like, I think 2 or 3 of these figures, not this figure exactly, but of this similar mold where these butterfly joints were just stuck, and I'd be playing around with it and moving it, and I didn't realize it was a stuck joint, and every time I move it, it just shear the plastic until the point where it just ripped out, and I was like, what the hell happened? And I looked inside, and the peg was in the socket, but it wasn't turning because it was pinched between the plastics when they press it together. But this is a great figure. Now we're going to take a look at some Toy Biz Spider-Man figures. Alright, so this was from I think the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, I think. So this is when Sony had them, was strictly producing the movies, and Sam Raimi was at the helm directing them. So this Spider-Man is more indicative of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. And I remember when I got this figure, it was a big deal. You know, we got Spider-Man figures before, but this was like super articulated, and it was so awesome that they actually sized them up and made like a 12-inch version. And I think Toy Fair magazine was actually talking about how that figure was kind of super cool and a big deal. And this, you know, Toy Biz is they were kind of nuts. They gave us articulation everywhere. You know, they even gave us finger articulation, so you didn't need to swap out hands. You just move the fingers and you could do the web shooting hands. Instead of swiveling at the wrist, it swivels at the forearm. He has bicep swivel, but it kind of breaks the muscle, so it's not as smooth looking, but it is cool. I mean, this figure came out like in, I think, the late 90s or early 2000s. 2002. So it's cool. I can remember I tried to get him every kind of like McFarlane kind of pose. And for me, this really set the bar of what to expect from a Spider-Man figure. It was awesome. So yeah, I have a lot of fond memories of this Spider-Man. Except after a while, as you can see, his head is kind of just loosey-goosey and spinning around. And then we get into the weird era of Toy Biz when they're doing 6-inch figures. I bought this a couple years ago. It's a very old figure. I bought this Neo on card. It was from. This also came out in, I think, I can't read the day. Is it 2000 or 2002? This might be 2002, I think. So I mean, roughly these figures are from the, give or take a year. These two figures are from the same time period, but different intent. This was made more so to reflect the movie. And Toy Biz, they were just making a line of like comic book inspired Spider-Man figures. This was one of them. I saw this figure at a secondhand toy store, and I fell in love with it. I've mentioned this in other videos. One thing that was big in the 90s is that it almost seems like when they designed action figures, is that it seems like they just sculpted a statue at first that was in a very predetermined pose, and then afterwards they would, figure out where the joints were and make the cuts, and then add the articulation, because this guy doesn't have a very natural neutral pose. If you look at him, his head's on a ball joint, rotates, but his neck is permanently leaning to the right. His body's kind of contorted, so it looks like he's just already in like position to fight. And it's like no matter what you do with him, you can't get him in any sort of really cool action pose, even though he's articulated, just because parts of his body are already predetermined, and it's goofy looking, but there's a very, I don't know, unless I just have a different way of looking at toys from this time period. I think I just like to romanticize the way toys were in the 90s and early 2000s. It's kind of like the Wild West, to be honest. I don't know what it is, but companies, they made everything. I think they're a little bit more selective now because, money's always an issue, but back then they made toys of everything. They took chances, they took risks, and I think the reason why they don't do that anymore is because back then I don't think it always paid off. But Spider-Man was a character that's always popular with kids, and you get really cool stuff. If you could find some of the older Toy Biz Marvel figures, whether it's Marvel Legends or like the dedicated Spider-Man or X-Men lines or Avenger lines or whatever, pick up a figure every now and then, especially if you didn't grow up during that era. It's a kind of good history lesson, so you can appreciate how far action figures have come, to now, because the engineering's amazing, and the toys you get are really high quality. But back then they kind of went overboard on some things. Like I was talking about applying washes. Now here, I love the fact that they applied like a wash and it brought out all the detail in the webbing. Whereas on this figure, you don't, there's nothing. It looks very cheap, plain, and just plastic. Whereas this is kind of like someone put care. In all honesty, it was probably done in a sweatshop. So, but it just looks different. It looks more detailed. Yeah. So this is my look at the Peter B. Parker from Into the Spider-Verse. It's a Marvel Legends figure. If I had to rate it numerically from a scale of 1 to 10, I think I really want to say an 8. Just because I love the character so much. But I think that might be a little bit too generous, just because the figure, as beautiful as I think it is, it could use some more work. Definitely they could have added a wash to bring out the detail here. In terms of playability and posability, he has everything going for him, but it's like I said, I don't think a kid's gonna look at this and say, hey, I want to get that and pretend this is Spider-Man. For me, a kid might look at this and go, hey, that looks like my dad. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna say this guy's about a 7 to a 7.5, but in my heart it's an 8 to a 9, because I love the character so much. All right, to close things up, my name is Lou. Once again, thank you for dropping by. I greatly appreciate that you spend a couple of minutes with me each day to check out my toys and what I have to say about them. I hope you found this informative and took something away from it. So until the next time, take care and stop by anytime.